The reason I started doing these Tuesday calls as a mindset coach is because I realized the fear and the anxiety that I began seeing in not only my tribe, my community, my family, my friends, and in typically people that were typically headstrong people. And so there's a lot going on right now in this world. You know, there's health, which is being compromised, right? That's one of the biggest fears is health. You know, is something going to happen to me? Is something going to happen to my loved one? And then there's wealth, because it's not a surprise. We're in a recession. And then there's also, I noticed, you know, I realized, okay, there's health, there's wealth being compromised, but what's also being compromised is our mindset, because that's being chipped away at every day. And so as leaders, and when I say leaders, I'm not talking about just, you know, what Garret and I do, but what all of you do, whether it's you being a friend, you being a sister, you being a mother, you know, any role that you play in your life makes you a leader. So as leaders, we have the ability to impact people and those that come around us. So that's why I began these Tuesday calls, and I got together with community leaders like Garret to be able to offer this. So if there's anything that you feel would be great for these Tuesday calls, let me know. I am open to suggestions and feedback, and I'd love to be able to get together with other leaders that would help you during this time. Okay. So without further ado, I am going to introduce my good friend and today's main speaker, Garret Biss. And he's a recovery mindset coach and retired Marine Corps pilot. He's been a human potential trainer for 4 years. And one of the things that I really love about Garret is that I see his passion in everything that he does. And that's the main reason that I wanted him to come on here and be the speaker and main attraction today, because I see the heart that he puts in to helping people and helping the world. And I do feel that we need more people like you, Garret. And so thank you for what you do. And so what we'll talk about today is we're going to be talking about different ideas or tips on not getting to that point where you are addicted. And then if you are in recovery, then what can you do to stay away from alcohol or drugs at this time? Because that is something that we've been using as an escape. So I will, do you want me to just go over a couple of facts before you start your...
Whatever you like, or you can throw them in there as you see fit, whatever you like.
All right. Sounds good. So go ahead.
And we'll keep our eye on the chat too. If you have any questions, then feel free to drop something in the chat. If we don't get to it now, I'll put my email there. I'd love to connect with you afterwards. You're welcome to reach out anytime. If you want to continue this discussion, if you got some more questions, something you didn't want to ask, I'd love to connect and help you in any way that I can.
Absolutely. And so then one of the things that came up is when Garret and I were speaking, we saw a couple of glaring statistics, right? One of them is online alcohol sales are up 240% during this time, this COVID time. Now, mind you, COVID's really just been around a month and a half maybe. Yeah. And so for that small time frame to have online alcohol sales up 240%. If we look at only the week ending March 14th, sales of 3-liter boxes of wine rose by 53%. And then 24 packs of beer increased by 24%. You know, so there was one thing that I was reading that actually shows that during recession time, you know, people make less money because they're not working, right? But then alcohol actually increases. So what they're doing is basically, I mean, yes, they're using it for an escape, but they're also just buying cheap alcohol, and they buy it in bulk like this. So it's something that's kind of, you start seeing a trend. And so that's one of the things is like, we use alcohol as an escape. And so I'm wondering, Garret, what you can give as a tip where maybe there's something else that we can do during times like these.
Yeah, certainly. So much to talk about, so many ideas to share. First, I just want to thank you very much for allowing this to happen tonight. I think one of the biggest things that we can do just in general in our society is have more conversations about addiction. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of misunderstandings. There's a lot of shame and stigma that prevent people from even asking the questions. So there's so many people that suffer in silence, either in active addiction, in a life where there's a substance or behavior that's really running the show or creating too much of a negative consequence in their life. Even people that wouldn't be recognized as in active addiction, there's still a lot of wasted potential, wasted joy and suffering that's created because we allow these external substances or behaviors to kind of take hold of our life in a negative way. And there's a lot of people that are in recovery who are facing the constant the reality that there's something in their past that they're trying to get away from, and trying different things to do that. Some are making more progress than others, but it's always something that's going to be in the back of their mind, that there's at least some semblance of fear or just some notion that there's something that should be feared and respected, and that is that substance or that behavior that they're trying to get away from. One thing I noticed is, as we're talking, as people are making introductions, is there's representation from many different professions, many different nationalities, ages, everything, just in this small group of people that have come together. And this really drives home the fact that addiction is something that touches everybody. Because of the stigma, because of the limited number of conversations that we have, sometimes we get led into this understanding or this belief that it's something that touches those people or affects those people. But the reality is, you look at the numbers, the statistics of the amount of people just in America alone that are struggling with some form of addiction. So about 25 to 30 million people in active addiction, about 25 to 30 million people living in recovery, and an estimated 60 million people that are not at that phase of addiction yet, but there's some substance or behavior that is taking control of their life in a negative way or preventing them from experiencing greater joy and success in their life. So altogether, that's more than 100 million people. So about 1 in 3 Americans is touched directly. But if 1 in 3 Americans is touched directly or suffering with it in their personal life, then that means everybody is affected in some way, because it affects, as we've talked about, it very quickly becomes a family issue. So it affects everybody else in the family, affects everybody else in the neighborhood, affects everybody else, all the coworkers, everybody else in the community. So it's really something that affects all of us. There is no them or us. There is no people that could be addicted or not be addicted. The reality is, if you have a heartbeat and you're a human being, there is the possibility you do have that propensity toward addictive behaviors. It's in our wiring. It's in the way that our brain works. So having these discussions and learning more about this and realizing what addiction is, what it's not, lessening the fear or the discomfort about talking about it and asking questions can do tremendous good for this whole situation, to help everybody move to a better place, whether they struggle with it or whether they have a loved one that struggled with it and they want to get to that better place.
And then I guess that brings up a good point, because one of the things that you said was, the amount of people, right? And then we come from just a different, any career, any background, it could impact anybody. And then I want to just bring up why alcohol was actually considered essential. Did you ever wonder that? I mean, it was.
Yeah, so that's a question a lot of people have been asking, and the reason behind it, my understanding of it is, of the about 30 million people that are in active addiction, maybe 20 or so of those are considered alcoholics and are in active alcohol addiction. About 10% of those are physically or chemically dependent on that substance. And alcohol is one of the few things that, while you're detoxing from, can actually kill you. So if you didn't have access to it, you could die. So if that's 2 or 3 million Americans that would actually die if they didn't have access to it, that's the reason why. So there's no right or wrong. The decision that we've made as a country and as many communities have made is to continue to make that available. So that's the good that comes from it, is we don't have to worry about these people dying or these people going through rancid detox and filling up our hospital beds for that reason. But then there's the consequence of that. And the reality is, a lot of people that aren't in active addiction or wouldn't be classified as alcoholics are now consuming a lot more than they would. As we'll talk about some of the reasons why. One thing I like to point out, especially as we're just talking about addiction in general. So my basic understanding of addiction is that any substance or behavior that's external to our body that we seek or expose ourselves to to deal with some kind of internal pain or discomfort, or to create a positive response in our body. Some addictions are for trying to prolong a good feeling in our body. But anytime we need to seek something external to us, and that could be a behavior, it could be a substance, to deal with something that's going on inside, that's what opens up the door for addictions to come in. And they show up in every way that's possible. Anything, addictions traditionally work on the dopamine or the reward centers of our brain. So anything that can have a dopamine response in our body, anything that feels good, has a propensity for addiction. If we become over-reliant on that thing and we begin to lose our natural coping mechanisms, our natural ability to deal with discomfort because of our over-reliance on this external thing, well, that's walking down that path towards it potentially becoming addictive, or potentially us not being able to survive without it, or have the feeling that we can't survive without it. So that can be true of alcohol. And one of the things I really want to have this conversation, because it's not just alcohol, it's not just drugs, it's not just, gambling and sex, the things that we traditionally think of or most commonly think of as addictions, but it's everything else that can be, food, anything that's high in salt, high in fats, high in sugar has a big response on our body. As we've all had bad days and we've all been uncomfortable at times, and the first thing we reach for is something that's high in sugar, high in salt, high in fats. Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I reach for, cookies.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, it's the potato chips or the ice cream, or both at the same time for me.
Well, porn is also one of the things that are pretty high. It's increasing in addiction.
That's right.
In the US.
Yeah, and unfortunately, so talking about some of the things that have been going on the last couple of weeks, one thing I read is that there's some online porn sites that have like premium memberships or something to have exclusive access to whatever it is, that traditionally there's a fee for it, but now they're allowing people to create these memberships for free. So think about that in this time where people are most uncomfortable, most insecure. So the things that create that discomfort inside, that leads us to seeking something external in nature. With this COVID epidemic, we're seeing so many of these things exacerbated. So much of the structure and the stability that we once had that's no longer there, which creates this disease inside, which we're seeking things external. So at that time, these things becoming more and more available, it's a scary time. And that's really why I want to have this conversation, so we can understand this and look at some different things that we can do as individuals, that we can share with other people, people that are pre-addiction, people that are in recovery, people that just don't want to have to worry about it. So they want to reinforce some of the healthy things that we can do, not just now during this epidemic, during this period of isolation, but moving forward. There's a lot that we can discover and learn about ourselves during this time that will help us moving forward.
So in taking kind of just a step-by-step approach to it. So let's say, we're in this time and we're dealing with these stresses and we're dealing with change, a lot of change, very fast. How do you know that, or how do you begin to tell that there's actually a problem?
Yeah, certainly. So I think a really good place to start, where I usually start a lot of conversations about addiction, is by changing the context of the question and the understanding of addiction, so we can see it from a different light. A lot of conversations, a lot of talk about addiction talks about all the bad things about addiction, talks about all the consequences, all the costs, the cost that it has on relationships, the cost that it has health-wise, financially wise, all the repercussions, of things that we've done in our past. And when we think of it in that context, it's really hard to understand why somebody would be drawn into it. Like, why would somebody smoke meth? Why would somebody expose themselves to cocaine? Why would somebody who's got a drinking problem go back and drink again? Because of course there's these known consequences. So it's really hard to wrap our head around that and understand it, or at least have compassion for somebody that's struggling with that. But if we look at it from the other side and we look at it and ask the question, what's good about addiction? Then we can begin to have some understanding for that, because it's not all negative. If it was all negative, then people wouldn't expose themselves to things. There is some good that comes from it in the moment, not over the long term, but in the moment. And if I was in a large audience and I was asking people some of the common answers that come up, like what is good about addiction, or what do you get from that substance or behavior, some of the common answers are, it's a relief of boredom, it's a relief of physical pain, a relief of emotional pain. It helps me, it relaxes me, helps me feel more connected, helps me feel more accepted. And we look at all of these common needs that we have, and we can begin to understand why somebody would expose it. Nobody that I've ever talked to that is in active addiction or spent a period of their life in active addiction would like to be in that place. The reason that they're stuck there, the reason they keep falling back there is because they don't have whatever it is that they need, the internal capacity, the awareness, the tools, the resources, the belief in their self to move beyond that and to cope with life, the challenges of life that we all face but to cope with that or their situation that they're in without that substance or behavior. It's as real a need for somebody who's in active addiction as breathing air or as drinking water. It feels as real of a need. And when we start to look at how what the addiction addresses by looking at what's good about the addiction, then we can understand that a little bit more. It helps fuel compassion and also helps create awareness for ourselves and for others. The way I think about addiction is we look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you're not familiar with it, it's just kind of a hierarchy of needs that we have. Every human being, really every life form, but every human being specifically has basic needs. We have needs for security. We have needs for safety. We have needs for connection and acceptance. We have needs for security in our sense of future. We have basic biological needs for nutrition, for water, for food, and a little bit higher need for a good sense of meaning and purpose in our life. And whenever one of those needs isn't met, or we feel like one of those needs isn't satisfied, there's really three things that we can do about that specific need. One, we can solve the problem. So if we're hungry, we can go find food, we can eat. If we feel unsafe because we don't have we don't have strong connections with other people, we're very social beings, we need connections with other people to survive. All of our brains and our bodies are wired for connection. A lot of the physiological responses that we have make us prone to or need or rely on connection with other people. So if there's one of those needs that we have and it's not being fulfilled, there's three things that we can do. One, we can fulfill that need. So if we need connection with other people, we can go to a social environment, we can reach out, we can connect with somebody, we can feel that connection. We can drink food, we can drink water, have food, and we can solve that need. The second thing that we can do is we can just withstand the discomfort. We can suffer through it. Many times, if we suffer long enough with an unmet need, we'll just begin to numb that sensation. If you go for long enough without food, that sense of hunger goes away. Same thing emotionally. If we have an emotional need that's not being met and we can suffer long enough, we can numb it. And the problem with that is the problem with either chemically numbing it or just numbing it, not focusing moving our awareness somewhere else and not addressing it. The problem with that is we can't just numb bad emotions. We can't just numb bad things. When we numb something, whether it's chemically or whether it's just emotionally, we numb everything. So when you numb the bad, you also numb the good. Our ability to feel joy and happiness is also diminished when we're trying to diminish that sensation of that pain. So we can solve the problem, we can withstand the discomfort and just live in that suffering, or we can discharge that pain, that discomfort with some external means. And that's what I was talking about with things that are addictive. It's some external substance or behavior that allows us to discharge that internal discomfort. If we have a need and it's not being met or it's not being fulfilled, we can. So our brain is wired to tell us, so if we have a need for food and we go and we eat something sweet, it releases dopamine in our body, and that tells our brain, calm down, we've got that need met. Unfortunate thing is, if we have a need that's not being met and we expose ourselves to something else that creates that dopamine, then that will also tell our body that that need is being met. And this starts to, it's a function of our brain. It's an unfortunate reality of our brain. But if we have a social need, if we have a need for meaning and purpose in our life that's not being fulfilled, if we've experienced trauma or we've just never developed and cultivated good relationships to help us feel that connection, then we're going to feel that need inside. And unfortunately, there's these things that we can become addicted to, which will tell our brain that it will discharge this pain or this anxiety. So that's not just the things that we think of as those common addictions, but it's the things that we think of that are less common. It can be a constant numbing of our mind, of our thoughts, of our attention by Netflix binging for hours a day. It can be that food. It can be online shopping. When we buy something, it gives us a little dopamine hit. So that can help discharge. And now that we're all sitting around with on our couches with Amazon and the internet and e-commerce and everything, we have kind of unlimited capacity or unlimited access to those things. And then, as we mentioned, the alcohol sales are going up. These are all some common things that help us discharge that discomfort. So as we're going through this COVID epidemic, and some of the common discomforts that we feel as humans are really being exacerbated now. So And I think I put this in the description. I don't know if it was the Facebook page or something, but I said, what does this sound like? Lack of security, security of health, security of financial future, job security, lack of meaning and purpose, lack of connection, feelings of isolation, feelings of boredom. What does that sound like? Well, it sounds like COVID. I mean, it sounds like trying to live through this epidemic, but all of those are factors, contributing factors or exacerbating factors that lead somebody to that extreme discomfort that often leads somebody to addiction, or if you're living in recovery, can move somebody back toward that active addiction.
And so traumas are being added right now too. Right.
Absolutely.
So people are losing loved ones, and that could be something that's traumatic especially if you're losing more than one, which there's been people that. So this is it's an easy road to addiction, whether it's alcohol or anything else that you're being addicted
to. Whether you're moving forward in that direction and you're reaching the bounds of your capacity to deal with the discomfort in your life, because there's so many things that are piling up on your plate right now at one time that you haven't had to deal with before. Maybe you lost your job, maybe that, so your job is not just your financial means, but also your sense of self-worth many times comes from your ability to provide for yourself, for your family. Maybe you have a close loved one who's passed away. So now the sense of control that you once had, or the sense of security that you once had over your family and the health of your family is now jeopardized. So all of these things, they can either lead you toward that, or they can, move you back towards that active addiction if that's where you are. A lot of people, especially early in recovery, one of the most common things that people suffer through is a strong sense of anxiety. Because for all of their time in active addiction, they had control over any anxiety. If they felt anxiety, they didn't want it. They had the substance or behavior that they relied on to numb or discharge that pain. And when you start to live your life, or begin to live your life without that mechanism that you can use at any moment to discharge that anxiety, and you've gone through months or years of your life without the natural ability, the natural capacity to deal with that anxiety and discharge that anxiety through healthy means, then that natural ability begins to atrophy. So it's just like if you were to tie one arm or tie one leg off and not use it for a period of time, the muscles would begin to atrophy. The same is true of our natural coping mechanisms. The longer that we don't use it, it begins to atrophy to the point where we don't have that when we need it. Now you're looking at somebody's life and you take away that substance or that behavior that's become their control mechanism to deal with that anxiety. Now they feel extremely anxious because now they're in a time. I understand anxiety. It's an emotional response to feeling like we are not in control of the basic need that we have. So whenever we rely on somebody else to fulfill a basic human need, or if we have a need, think about the times that we've been most anxious in our lives. If we feel like we might lose a job, but it's not up to us whether we lose it, it's up to the boss. It's or it's up to the economy. If our health is jeopardized, or the health of a loved one is jeopardized, now we don't have control over whether or not we lose that connection, or we lose our health and our well-being. So anxiety comes from feeling like we are out of control of fulfilling one of our basic needs. So the ways that we can fulfill our basic needs and have that control is by looking at the natural mechanisms that we have to deal with that discomfort and building that up, building up our capacity to deal with that. And that's whether you've suffered with addiction or whether you're living in recovery, it's all the same.
So let me just, I'm going to kind of just recap that because it's a lot of information that's coming at us, right? So
that's why you're recording, right?
That's why I'm recording. But let me I'll recap a little bit just to see if I'm getting it. And then if you guys have questions, of course, please just go ahead and ask. But so then it seems like that during this time, there's a lot going on, right? There's fear, there's anxiety, there's lack of connection. A lot of people, from what I've come across, have a lack of purpose. They're still finding it. I've found that people tend to label midlife crisis, right? I don't know where this came up, this midlife crisis. I call bullshit on midlife crisis. I don't think that there is such a thing. I think that really it's our soul asking for change of some sort, right? Or maybe it's our spirit saying, hey, it's time for you to really just go focus on something that you could be doing, something you really want. And it's that asking for change that makes us want that. But then we start putting it aside, or we start thinking, no, what am I'm crazy. I can't do that. I can't change careers. I can't, leave this toxic relationship, whatever it may be. Right. So then we have all of these things coming together during a time like this, or during a crisis, or during recession. And so then people begin looking for connection. They begin looking for purpose. They can't find these kind of things, or maybe they're triggered by traumas, and then they don't know how to deal with it. So they start numbing it or escaping with an addiction, or not really, with anything, right? And it becomes an addiction at some point. And so then now we're there, and because they continue to deal with it in that way, then they're not building that, I'm going to call it resilience, or building that ability to deal with that in a different way, right?
Yeah, certainly.
So now we're there. And so what would you say, is that, how do you catch yourself in that trap, I'm going to call it?
Yeah, certainly. So a couple things. One, I'll just make one point, because this is really what led me into this passion. So I think of, midlife crisis. I think maybe it's just coincidental that it happens, around the same age for people. I think it's a strong yearning for a sense of meaning and purpose. It's trying to make sense of, what the hell am I doing here? How do I provide value? What's this all about? But we all, but people tend to experience it around the same age, because that's about the age that their mind and their attention isn't distracted by other things.
Absolutely.
Getting the education, getting the job, starting to climb the ladder, starting to make a name for yourself, growing kids.
Well, it's typically the point where you already climbed that ladder and you're like, what? Where did this lead me? Maybe it wasn't the ladder I wanted to climb.
Absolutely. And that's that's the experience that I had when I was in the Marine Corps. I've been in the Marine Corps for about 13 years. And I had been working very hard for this, this promotion. I was finally an aircraft commander, flying C-130s. And I had been working, around the clock, not only at my job, trying to get promoted, trying to get the next certification, the next qual, but also working very hard at what society or what the culture said I should be striving for to experience this thing called happiness. So I was pouring all my time and energy into trying, getting the promotion, getting the next job, getting the higher salary, getting the house, getting the 2 cars, getting the wife, getting the kids, taking the nice vacations, going out to the nice dinners. And I faced this point where when I finally picked my head up from the books and started paying attention to what was going on, I said, I'm just miserable. Like, I'm putting 100% of the effort that I have into all these things that I thought were going to fill this void inside of me and finally make me happy. And I am nothing but exhausted and miserable. And the little bit of return of happiness or joy that I got from all that I was doing, I said, so one of 2 things is going on. Either life is supposed to be this miserable experience that you suffer through and you die at the end, or hopefully there's just some fundamental beliefs that I've gotten wrong, some misunderstandings that I have about values or about what the world is, what life is supposed to be about. And fortunately, I had some time where I could really question a lot of the values, the beliefs, the understandings that I had. But that was also the time where I was struggling most with substance and behaviors that I was using to numb, because all that time that I was pouring into trying to climb that ladder, both socially, economically, in my job, I had a tremendous void inside. The best way I could describe it is that there was some demon inside, and my substances and my behaviors, most commonly alcohol or just spending money or anything that I could do, traveling just to distract my mind. I felt like that was the sword that I had to fight that demon inside. I didn't know what that demon was, but I also knew that if I were to lay down these substances and behaviors, I felt like I was going to die. I felt like I'd be gobbled up and it would kill me. So that was my hesitation. That was my resistance to make some fundamental changes in my life. But once I began to question some things, once I began to do some of the work to bring some more meaning and purpose into my life, it began to fill that void, fill my capacity to, the stronger sense of meaning that we have in our life, the greater capacity we have to deal with the discomfort and the pain. Viktor Frankl, he wrote a book about his time in a concentration camp, and he says that a strong sense of meaning is a person's ability to suffer. Suffering ceases to be suffering once there's a strong enough sense of meaning. Right. So I really believe that the stronger sense of meaning and the clarity we have about our life purpose, and where we're going in our life, then the greater capacity we have, the greater emotional resilience we have. I was going somewhere with that. And I was trying to answer your question. And also, so that's, that's really what drew me into this work and fuels my passion for it. It's because I've lived that. I mean, I've gone through that. I've felt that hell. I felt that tremendous existential crisis, that huge void inside that nothing could fill. And I tried everything. And, I have the consequences of many maladaptive coping mechanisms that never worked. Fortunately, I was able to move through that. And that's what inspires the work that I have, is what can I do to help lessen the number of people that go through that experience by having conversations like this, just getting the word out there, trying to bust through some of that stigma by helping people understand what addiction is and what addiction isn't. And just making it safe for people to have these conversations. If these were conversations that I could have had, if I felt that I could have had them, 10, 20 years ago, it would have saved me a lot of the pain, a lot of the suffering that I experienced. Unfortunately, the way that we think about addiction, it's that thing that we don't want to admit that that it's touched us, that it's touched a loved one's life. So, unfortunately, so many people suffer in silence when the answers to their questions or the solutions or the tools and the resource, the inspiration might be right next to them or right next door. So by having these conversations, I think it will bridge that and help a lot more people through it and help a lot of people prevent going that way. But for everybody that showed up, let's talk about what we can do during this time right now. You talked about, absolutely, when you're uncomfortable because you've got more stress, more factors on your plate right now than you've ever dealt with before, and now the stress over a period of time is wearing down your natural coping mechanisms. Enter addictive substance or behavior, the thing that has that propensity to become addictive in nature, whether that's binge watching, whether that's picking up, drinking too much, whether that's now starting to deviate from the pure prescription on your prescription medications and take them a little bit as unintended, whatever that is, so you can deal with that. It might help you deal with the pain that's on your plate right now, but as you mentioned, it also is reducing your natural capacity, your natural ability. And what scares me the most about that, with this COVID epidemic, looking at how long it's been going, 5, 6, 7 weeks now, and might go for a couple of more. When you look at the neuroscience and you look at neuropathways and you look at what it shows about how long it takes to create a habit that we then can't break or then becomes very hard to break, you're looking at 40 to 60 days. I mean, that's how long people have been reaching for these coping mechanisms. Yeah. So that's what scares me the most, because the reality is when we do get back to a sense of normal or a new sense of normal, and people do go back to something that resembles more what their old life was, if we develop this new habit so that now we need this external substance or behavior to deal with the natural pain, and now those natural roller coasters of emotions that we go through, we've lost our capacity to deal with that without this external substance or behavior, or we've created more pain and suffering in our life because we are Netflix binging and we're not looking for another job. We're not we are spending on our credit card to buy things to feel good in the moment. We're putting on 10, 15, 20 pounds. I was thinking about that last night. They talk about the freshman 15 when people go off to college and they gain 15 pounds. Exactly. I was like, COVID 15. What's it going to be like the COVID 15?
The COVID 15.
Yeah.
So would you say, Garret, because now, let's say we're there, the best way we can help ourselves, is it becoming aware? Is it becoming aware that we're feeling numb? Is it becoming aware that we're feeling lack of connection or lack of purpose? Or is it becoming aware of the things that we're doing? Maybe we become aware of, hey, I used to just drink 1 glass of wine, but now I'm drinking 2 full glasses of wine. How do we notice? How do we become aware?
Certainly. I think just, awareness in general is what we need. Being mindful, I think, is the first thing that I would recommend to anybody. Just be more mindful. I'm not saying avoid everything that has a propensity to be addictive. I'm not saying, stop drinking, stop eating, crappy food, stop watching that. Don't avoid it. Don't stop it altogether, but just be more mindful of it. Don't just, we mindlessly walk to the cabinet, or we mindlessly walk to the freezer and we grab something, or we mindlessly, sit there and engage in something. Just be more mindful of it and recognize yourself, catch yourself. And if you are, my story in recovery, I don't, except for some chemical drugs or prescription drugs, I don't abstain from anything that I over relied on, or that was my addictive or my drug of choice, if you want to talk about it that way. But what I do is I balance for me, it's all about a game of awareness. And if I'm eating too many sweets, or if I'm mindlessly consuming sweets, or I'm mindlessly consuming, over consuming carbs or processed foods, it's an awareness game for me. And when I recognize that, then I'll stop it and I'll fast from it for a period of time. Maybe I'll give up eating sweets for 2 months, or give up drinking alcohol for, I commonly do it for 90 days at a time. If I'm not receiving the full benefit of joy and happiness or appreciation for whatever that thing is, then I would avoid it, or it's just that awareness thing. So if we find that we're sitting there and we didn't even realize that we just ate a whole bag of chips, well, become aware of that and recognize that. And just that general sense of mindlessness, so that we don't just mindlessly consume things or do things because of that fear about that habit, or that creation for that habit. So the more that we rely on something external, the less our natural ability to cope with the stresses in our life. So recognizing that, just be mindful of that, and anything that we can do.
Your actions are doing. So then, and I'll just kind of put in a personal example of that. Sometimes I'll go and I'll just eat. So I'll just begin, the fridge is right there now.
Yeah.
And we can't go outside. So I'll go to the fridge, I'll be eating something. And I've learned to become aware of, when I'm eating, I'll ask myself, wait a minute, was I actually hungry? And the answer typically was no. And I started realizing, okay, wait, when is it that I eat? And I realized that I eat when I'm anxious, when I'm nervous about something, when something's going through my mind and I need an answer for it. And so I eat. So that's I guess, an example of becoming aware. Yeah. And so I'm going to ask you, how about for our loved ones? So let's say we begin noticing our teenager, or we begin noticing our significant other, our friends or sister, whoever it may be. It's like, hey, that's a little bit different. They used to just maybe have one drink, and now, or maybe they'd go out once a week and now they're going out twice, 3 times a week. And, so how do you can become aware because you're a neutral party, but do you have any tips on saying something or how you handle something like that?
Yeah, so the 2 biggest pieces of advice I have for anybody who has a loved one that's struggling is, the first thing is all of their actions. Well, I don't know. I can see some extreme. So generally, all of our actions are for us, not against somebody else. Maybe there's some extreme examples where somebody will go out of their way to hurt somebody else, but really that also is, for the person's benefit. So as somebody is doing more and more things, recognize it's not an action against you, especially if it's a loved one. It's not an action against you. It's an action for them. It's a survival. It's a game of survival for them. It's them trying to deal with or cope with something that's unnatural, or that unnatural sense of something that they can't deal with, that discomfort that they can't deal with. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and I learned this in my marriage, that the energy that you put out is the energy that you're going to get back. If you go with anything except for compassion and understanding, then you're going to exacerbate the emotional problem that they're experiencing. If you show up with judgment or a sense of judgment, extremely hard. I'm not saying that anything about this is easy, and you can't, and the flip side of that is you can't just show up with compassion and understanding and think that will be enough. But anything other than compassion and understanding, is going to, is likely going to make that problem worse. So if you are showing up with judgment, this is speaking from personal experience. So when I was struggling the most with drinking, with alcohol, the more that I felt judged, the harder it was for me to stop. So I'd drink, 3 or 4 beers, and then, somebody would say something like, "Oh, shouldn't you stop?" And now I'm like, screw that,
Got you.
Now I'm all in on this. So and this comes back to an important thing. Yeah, this comes back to an important thing is, what we need more, just beyond our basic biological needs, we all need strong sense of connection. Anytime you show up with judgment or shaming or guilting or anybody, like you're just severing that sense of connection. Connection in itself, and this is why our bodies are really hardwired for strong senses of connection. All of the calming neurotransmitters and hormones in our body are often released when we do something that affects connection. So by that compassion, that understanding, that love, that can help foster that sense of connection and help somebody deal with, or be at least in a better place with. Now, for us personally, and what we can recommend, or what we can help empower in our loved ones that are struggling with it, is stronger social connections. So during this time, so that's my 3 points, my 3 takeaways. If you take away anything from this, is 1, be mindful. Just be mindful of those things that have that propensity for addiction, and just catch yourself in it. And I'm not saying stop it, but just say, oh, I'm noticing that. It's great self-awareness on your part to notice, when was it that you started to reach for the food? It was when you felt a little anxious. For a lot of people, it's when they feel bored, when they feel anxious. And then we transition our attention to something else to deal with that internal discomfort. A lot of the work that I do with people in recovery, I go through cravings assessment. So it's like, hey, when do those cravings come up for you the most? And what can we learn about that? Is it because you feel that lack of connection, that lack of self-esteem? So just anything that we can do to improve our awareness is going to go a long way. The second thing is that strong social connection. I hate this term, social distancing, because that's crap. It's not supposed to be social distancing. It's supposed to be physical distancing. But everybody kind of has in their mind, and we're conditioning this with this thought that it's social distancing, which is crap. We need social connection. We just have to go about it a little bit differently now. That we're in the situation that we are. So there's a lot of things that we can do to help get more social connection. Showing up and watching this presentation tonight and connecting with people and having conversations is a great way. We're fortunate now that we're going through this, that we have the technology that we do. You can video chat with just about anybody very easily. I would recommend inviting more of that into your life, not just for work, but if you have a friend that you can catch up with and have a lunch date together or meet for dinner. So my family and I got family in Florida and family in North Carolina. And last Sunday, we all sat around, we connected on Zoom, and we shared a family dinner. We had more people in the room connecting than what we normally have during the holidays. So that was great because it helps foster that connection.
So creating a sense of connection.
Absolutely. And it also helps us feel less isolated, less alone. One thing that really exacerbates the stress feeling is feeling like we're the only ones that are going through it, or we're suffering it maybe a little bit worse than somebody else. So the more that we can foster that connection with others, whether it's face-to-face chat, now we can never reproduce or recreate the benefit that you get from sitting with somebody, but having this visual conversation with somebody is much more effective than just talking over the phone, because of all the nonverbal communication that we can affect with video chatting. And then other things that we can do that also provide a great sense of relief and sense of control, like random acts of kindness. A lot of the benefit of that, anytime we do something for the benefit of another person, we receive some benefit from that. A lot of the things that we do for social connection or random acts of kindness gives us a big dopamine release, a big oxytocin release. These are natural hormones that reduce the stress, the cortisol and the adrenaline in our body. So just reaching out to people, random act of kindness. So do something for a stranger, reach out to a friend, send them a text, send a text to somebody that you haven't chatted with in a while and just say, hey, thinking about you, hope you're doing well. Just that little gesture right there will benefit both of you and help you feel more of that social connection while you're physically distancing. And then the last point was, so first one, be mindful. 2, social connection, make sure you foster that.
Random
look
acts
a little
of
differently. Yep. And then the third thing is just keeping yourself busy, keeping your hands, your mind, and your body busy constructively. So not busy just mindlessly numbing by exposing ourselves to something, but keep ourselves busy with something constructive. This is a great time to engage your mind. Go read a book if you haven't been reading in a while. Take an online class. You can go to Udemy. You can take an online course. Go learn about something. Invite a new hobby into your life or something you're fascinated about. Go watch a documentary. Something that will actively engage your mind and not just be so passive, which is more akin to numbing. So keeping your hands busy. So if you can do anything with a craft, you can do anything around the house. You can do anything in the garden. So I overheard somebody saying, at the local, where was I? We have a local hardware store downtown, and the gardening, they said their sales are up like 50% over last year because a lot of people are now creating these home gardens because it's something to do. Great way to get your hands into the dirt and into nature. So all of these things can be great, and all of these things. So whether it's keeping your mind, your body busy, your body active. Don't isolate as more than you have to. You can do some basic exercises. Any exercise that you do, any movement of your body is a natural way to discharge that anxiety. The longer you sit there, the more it builds up like static electricity. So keeping your body a little bit busy will help deplete that. But these are also things that will naturally increase your coping mechanisms, your natural ability to deal with discomfort, which will help you moving forward.
So Thank you. So then and thank you for that recap, because you gave us those three things that we can actually become aware of: being more mindful, having a sense of connection, and then keeping physically busy. And so then that's for us. And then that could also be for friends, families, or even people that are in recovery.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. That may be kind of going through this challenge right now.
Mm-hmm. And that, so absolutely. And thank you for reminding me that. That's why I brought that up. So yeah, not just your body, but also your mind. If there's anything you can do to engage your mind, that can be what you offer to somebody, or what you encourage in somebody that you're afraid they're doing too many of those destructive numbing mechanisms. So find ways that you can connect with them more, or offer ways or encourage them to connect with some other people, or find a hobby, engage in a hobby, learn something, anything that can constructively keep their mind busy. And offering that with compassion, offering that without judgment, not saying,
Exactly.
put that effing beer down and go, call a friend.
Right.
But, offering it up, have that understanding about what it is. Whenever somebody reaches for something external to deal with an internal pain, again, that's for them. It's not against somebody else.
Right.
And the reason they're doing it is because they don't have the natural capacity at that moment to deal with whatever that discomfort is without that external thing.
And I think that's really important that you bring up, because sometimes we will see that as against me, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say if my spouse is beginning to drink more and I'm thinking, okay, then that's against me because he must be bored, or he just wants to be with his friends, or, he's not happy in the marriage. Mm-hmm. And so then we begin thinking, taking that to heart versus, just saying it, all right, this is something that a way that they're coping, something's going on with them. And so, and the other thing is, as parents too, then we'll see something that happens to our kids as a reflection of us, or something that we did wrong, So then that's really important for us to see, okay, hey, it is something that they are dealing with. It's not, you can't take it personally, and you can't have that judgment, because when we do take it personally, I think we tend to judge.
Certainly, yeah, and then that affects our sense of worth and our sense of self-esteem when we take it personally, because then we feel like we're out of control over something that we don't have control over. So it comes back to perception. But yeah, when we perceive that we lack control over something, then that just fuels our anxiety and puts us in a worse place, and wears us down over the long term. I'd love to answer any questions if there's any coming in. And
I'm going to unmute everybody, so just in case you have questions.
And I'll also throw in the chat a link to some of the work that I do individually. So I focus on working with people that are in recovery, helping them break free from. So when somebody finds a good path to recovery, and so one thing is, there's no single pathway to recovery. For everybody who's on that journey, they're going to find a different, unique pathway for them. And that's perfectly fine. That's something we need to respect and understand. And that's certainly the stance that I take as a recovery mindset coach. My job is to help people move beyond the chains of things that are remnant or lingering from the past, whether it's the self-doubt, the lack of self-esteem, the lack of confidence, whether it's the regret, the remorse, the guilt, the sense of shame, all these things that still linger when somebody finds their way into recovery, that prevent them from really experiencing their full potential for happiness, for joy, for success. So that's where I work, is to help them break free from those chains and really move into their higher potential in recovery. The saddest thing that I see are people that find their way to recovery. They have the courage, they have the willpower, they have the determination, the desire to find their way to recovery, and then they get stuck. And then they never move beyond that. They never realize their full potential because of all these things that aren't addressed, or that they didn't effectively address. And they feel like they're not worth it, or they feel like they're not capable of it. Mm-hmm. That's a bunch of crap. I mean, I think, one of the ways I talk about addiction is I think that life is much like a pendulum. And the further that the pendulum swings in one direction, the further it can go in the other. So if you can capitalize whatever that courage and that determination, that willpower and that strength was that moved you from active addiction to recovery, if you can leverage that, there's no limit to the amount of success and fulfillment that you can have in your life.
Well, thank you. And thanks so much for that information and for giving us that advice. So any questions out there? And I know that Garrett's answered a lot of questions in regards to addiction or things that you can do. I'm a money mindset coach, so feel free to ask anything about that if that's what you need to talk about. But please, any questions?
Well, it's Miriam from Puerto Rico.
Yes.
Hi, Miriam.
Hi. It's more of a comment and instead of a question, but I really did appreciate a lot when you were giving the advice as to how to talk with our loved one if we identify a pattern of behaviors that might be addicting. I get very frustrated when I'm looking for within myself, I'm struggling myself. I used to lean towards alcohol. I am not during the COVID pandemic. Curiously for me, it's a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have like patterns of depression, not so much of anxiety. And as soon as the COVID-19 anxiety hit, I had such a longing for control and to be alert that I stopped drinking altogether. So I haven't been drinking. My spouse, however, he's not a substance user, but he is playing a lot of video games. And it sounds, kind of funny, but I haven't been the best person and with compassion and lovingly pointing that out to him, right? We also have 2 kids. The longing for connection is there. But, it's not so easy when you're 24/7 in a house, a quarantine, to look for more dynamic ways of interacting, especially when it's a person that you've been with for 10 years. You already know the person. There's nothing new to learn, So
we can become so enmeshed with them too. Like, we take on and we feel their pain also. And when they're discharging it in ways and it's making it worse, it does affect us, certainly.
Exactly. So I just want to say thank you for touching on that point. It rang a bell. It lighted, something within me to change the tone and the approach. So thank you very much.
I do have, if you want to send me an email, I do have it was a presentation I did last year. I think it was like a 30-day guide or 30-day plan for helping somebody whose loved one struggles with addiction. And it's just some different exercises and reflections that you can do each day for 30 days. If you're interested in that, send me an email. I'll be happy to send that over to you.
Yes, that would be great. How can I find your email information?
So it's in the chat box. And and if you want to write it down right now, it's Garret. So Garret at GarretBiss.com. So Garret again, and then BISS.com. And I'll provide all that to Joyce, and she can email it out to anybody that registered.
Right.
Also.
Anybody that registered, we can send you that information too.
One point that you brought up though that I can't believe I completely missed addressing was technology and gaming. I mean, this is such a huge addiction. There was a National Geographic article I was reading. It was 2017. They did a big thing about addiction. And one of the guys they were interviewing, he was in Vegas at a conference helping the gaming industry deal with the addictive nature. Like, what are some protective measures that we can put in place to help some people, or what are some things that we can do, to offer support? So they're really studying the neurochemistry, the neurobiology of the brain. And he said, unfortunately, there was somebody in the conference room next to them or nearby in the same conference hall. And it was the same neurobiologists, the same scientists, the same people, the cohorts of those that were trying to help people with addictive tendencies and addictive natures, using the same science to help the gaming industry and help technology industry make our apps and make our devices more addictive. They everything that goes into this is completely programmed to be more addictive in nature. So we spend more time looking at it, the tones, the sounds, the colors, everything. That's right. Yeah. So this can certainly become addictive in nature. And there's people, the same people that are, studying the brain, they're leveraging this to help make things that are, more addictive, trying to get more of our attention to it. And that's just back to the awareness thing. Let's be aware of this. Do I reach for this thing too often? Am I reaching for it? And if I am, and it happens to be at certain times, what could be the stressor that's going on around me that's driving me to feel like I need to escape or no?
And that's perfect. Like, just a personal example there is, I was realizing that I was reaching for my phone way too much, and I like to meditate in the morning, but in the morning, what I was doing is my phone is next to my bed. So then I would reach for it and I'd start scrolling and seeing the news. And then since I already read the news, then let me check what's going on Instagram. Since I already checked what's going on Instagram, let me check what's going on LinkedIn. So then let's get back
to Facebook. We must have missed something.
right? So then it's like an hour passes and then, or 45 minutes passes and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, where did the time go? So I started noticing this pattern. And when I noticed this pattern, I became aware. And I think that that's the biggest thing that we can do. And that's why it was your number one, right? The mindfulness, becoming aware of our patterns, becoming aware of what it is that we begin to do, these little nuances. And so when I became aware that I was picking up my phone today in the morning, this is a perfect example. I became aware, I picked up my phone, and then I said, wait a minute, I'm gonna meditate. So then I put it back down and I said, I'm just going to do my own thing. Mm-hmm. And even if I have to get up and put it on the other side of the room so that I am not, just tempted to grab it again after 10 minutes, because we all have monkey minds. And so we tend to kind of just want to do something and stay busy all the time instead of just being with ourselves. And I think that's one of the things that's also been tough during this pandemic, that when you're just here and you're by yourself and your whole world has changed now, you now have so much more time to think and to think about and to reflect. And a lot of us may not want to go there.
That's right. Yeah.
Exactly. And we're so accustomed to being busy all the time. What are we running away from in our busyness?
Right.
You ask yourself, right? So definitely. I mean, thank you for that, Miriam. Thank you. Anyone else have any
point, Joyce, about the mindfulness aspect of it? So this is the thing. I mean, recognizing your behavior. I'm not saying avoid everything that could become addictive, and also
because I'm not stopping my cookies. Just saying.
Yeah, don't beat yourself up for it. I mean, just recognize it and then enjoy it. If you, sometimes I'll do, there was a time a couple of weeks ago I had a presentation didn't go very well, and I felt, all those negative thoughts kind of come up in your mind that you're worthless, you're stupid, nobody's gonna love you, all that, and it fueled a lot of anxiety in me. And I was like, and I recognized that when I was like, why do I have this huge craving for a chocolate milkshake? So then I recognized that, and I said, okay, so that's why I want it. I didn't avoid it. I went and I had it and I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it so much more and I respected it. And I got so much more enjoyment out of it. And it didn't just lead to that mindless consumption of something. That's where the danger comes in. Mm-hmm. And then the next morning, I didn't beat myself up for it. That's a big thing too. It's compassion for ourselves and not judging ourselves. If we judge ourselves for that bender that we went on last night or the money that we spent last month, then that's only going to wear us down and put us in a more vulnerable place to that thing taking over, that thing taking control of our life. So have compassion for yourself is just as important.
I love that. And I don't know if there's any mothers and actually parents in general, right? I actually, what you said just brought something back, because I felt like I wasn't having compassion for myself. There was times, I'm a single mom, so there was times that I felt like, okay, I didn't handle that well with my son, and I would feel bad. And so then when you start feeling this guilt and you start feeling this, I'm not good enough as a mom, and you tend to, or at least I tended to say, you know what, I just need to relax. Let me just have a glass of wine. And that's how it could start, right? So, but not beating yourself up over the things that you may not be great at, because none of us are perfect, so having compassion with yourself.
Yeah.
Any other questions out there? I want to hear from anybody else that may have any questions that Garret can help with, I can help with.
Hi, this is Anna from Puerto Rico. You hear me now?
Yes.
I can.
Hi. It's just a comment. You all have given me a lot to think about. It was very good. All the information that you have shared today. One thing is the social media, maybe addiction. I find myself sometimes looking, like you mentioned, in the morning, instead of having happy thoughts about the day, I'm just scrolling through my Instagram and, what is it? What comments? What's going on? Even the news. I don't watch the news on the TV. I rely completely on social media or Instagram or things like that. So I'm finding myself filled with anxiety sometimes, because I'm just, and I'm trying to put down the phone, which is something that maybe a lot of people are trying are doing, but they're not dealing with it. They're not mindful of how they're doing it. So it was a very good point what you just mentioned. It's just funny to send, funny stuff over the multiple chats that we all have on WhatsApp, for example. WhatsApp, I can be the entire morning looking at WhatsApp easily because I'm in so many chats because of my kids, because of my work, because of many other things. So it kind of it can be addictive, and you're not mindful of it. You're not thinking about it so much. So it was very interesting. And definitely social media. I mean, drinking, of course, it's something that a lot of people are engaging or are doing. Some may not think, I may not think, it's something that's affecting me, but it may be, and there's people who do have a very, a problem with it. I may have a problem and I'm not aware of it.
How many times did you check your phone during the last hour?
See. I did.
Less than 5, more than 5? No.
I did check it quite a few times because I do have a lot of chats. People, this is like the peak hour for people sending stuff. It's like in the morning and at night, even though people are not working for some reason at night and in the morning is when a lot of people are sending a lot of stuff. So it's, I did look at my phone quite a few times. You gave me a lot of things to think about and very good. So I thank you for the time.
Thank you very much for spending the time with us. One thing I will comment on there. So this is something that goes along with the awareness aspect of it is, so one strategy to use is just identify that thing that you want and then just allow yourself to have it for an hour, for 10 minutes, for the night, whatever it is, and then enjoy it. And then don't beat yourself up about it the next day. So, for the first 90 days of the year, I was no sweets, no alcohol. I was eating very low carbs. I was intermittent fasting. And then I went to Disney World and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go all in. Anything that I want is, it's no holds barred. And I enjoyed it. I allowed myself to enjoy it because the alternative is either we suffer against it like, damn it, what do I want? Why am I craving these things? Or we indulge a little bit and then we're beating ourselves up for it as we're eating the ice cream. We don't even get to enjoy the ice cream. We feel like crap for it, emotionally. And so then nothing good comes to that. And it puts us in a worse place, following that. So, if you recognize that you have this huge urge for the social media, now with mindfulness, with being aware of it, with investigating maybe why is it that I'm feeling this need for this external thing, and then instead of beating yourself up for it, just allow yourself to have it, allow yourself to enjoy it fully, get everything that you can from it, and then don't beat yourself up for it the next day or as that time passes.
One of the things before the COVID quarantine situation, I was, I'm still are, a person that it's either 100% or nothing. And that could lead you to self-sabotage because we're human and it's a process. So it's obvious that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to be missteps. And it would be very easy for me to say, oh, I had a misstep, feel guilty about it, and just back out of the process of trying to be better. And this COVID situation, trying to look at a positive side to it, it's like a Groundhog Day situation. Like the same day keeps repeating itself somewhat, you're in your house. So psychologically or subconsciously, it's like, oh, it's like the same opportunity over and over again. And it's helped me a lot to just give myself another chance, whatever I did that wasn't good or nurturing to the process that I want to lead. Then I have another Groundhog Day to just repeat it again and try a little better. And in that sense, just looking, like a positive outlook, if any exists, it's helped me a lot in that sense.
Very cool.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for sharing.
If something comes up later on, like I said, please feel free to send me an email. If there's a lot of questions or a lot of interest, you want to continue this conversation, I'm sure Joyce and I could jump on and do something again. I certainly had a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you, Garret. And then I want to just give you guys also a heads up. I'll send an email out with Garret's information. We can probably make this a private link somewhere, and then that way they can share it with people that if they found it useful, they can share it. You also mentioned self-sabotage. And actually, I have a course that is online, and it's a self-sabotage course, and it takes you through steps to just getting unstuck and finding out where in your life you may be self-sabotaging. So then that way you can say, okay, well, let me stop doing this. Let me move in a different direction. So then I will send you the Teachable website too. It's on Teachable. There's also a mini course called Getting Unstuck. And that one is, and it's funny because the title of it is pretty much, or the tagline is, it costs less than a happy hour drink. It's very fitting for right now. But so it's only, I think it's like $9 or $7 or something like that. And it's just kind of gets you some basic 3 fundamental steps that will just get you unstuck. And I made it super cheap just so that I can motivate as many people as I can. But I'm going to put that in the chat box too, where you can get the Teachable courses. So I'll do that.
Thank you. That's great.
And then there's a coupon. I'll email that out. But if you put early, that's a coupon code, and you get, I think it's $50 off from the self-sabotage course. So if there's no other questions, then I appreciate your coming on. I appreciate your presence and how interactive all you were. I really think that during this time, we need community, and it was great to have you all be part of our community. And thank you, Garret, for taking time to be with us.
Yeah, thank you everybody for showing up. Like I said, just having these conversations, getting this conversation out in the open, and getting some of the, increasing our awareness, our understanding about what addiction is and what it's not. It's going to have trickle down effects that affect so many people's lives in this generation and future generations. So thank you so much for taking this time tonight.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.